bit different than modern Zen practice. Really almost any modern Buddhist practice. I only teach what I know the Buddha taught as preserved in the Sutta Pitaka, which results in a quite different Dhamma, but I think an authentic Dhamma. And that's not to delegitimize any other practice. It's just to make the point that this is quite different. And so if you find an interest in this, again, this is the only reason I'm saying it, if you find an interest in the Buddha's Dhamma, at some point you're going to come up against the contradictions between what the Buddha taught and what else is out there. And that just means continue with practice. So you're joining us in the middle of a 12-week structured study based on one of my books called The Truth of Happiness, which is a basic but thorough introduction to what the Buddha actually taught and how to apply it in a practical way. So everything the Buddha taught was taught in the context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths. And he taught it as a very practical way of understanding what it means to be a human being, as opposed to annihilating what it means to be a human being by creating and attaching ourselves to magical views that are not possible for human beings to develop. And so the Buddha realized that too. That was one of the common problems during the Buddha's time that he recognized and quickly abandoned. So he taught an eightfold path as a way of developing profound understanding of the nature of human confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing stress and suffering. One aspect of that is right meditation that we just did. That's called jhana meditation. The Buddha taught that single meditation method for his entire 45-year teaching career, and he taught it for one single purpose: to deepen concentration. That's what jhana means. And from ever deepening concentration, we're able to hold in mind the Eightfold Path as our framework for developing that understanding. So we started our practice with just a look at the jhana meditation method, just to start doing it. As a sangha, we've been together, most of us, for a few years, in some cases 8 or 10 years. But when we do this once a year, we come back to just this basic practice. The second week, we looked at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where the beginning section of that, the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches how to do jhana meditation. So there's no ambiguity about even that. And that is related in the verbiage that you just listened to in our meditation that relates directly to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The next week, we looked at the 4 Noble Truths, where the Buddha states that as a consequence of having a human life, stress and suffering and confusion will occur. That's the first Noble Truth. The second Noble Truth is craving for and clinging to views rooted in ignorance of these 4 Noble Truths is a cause of all stress and unhappiness. The third Noble Truth, and not that they're all equally important, but the third Noble Truth provides for the ending of this. And the third Noble Truth simply states that cessation of this internal process of maintaining ignorance of 4 Noble Truths is possible. Cessation of it is possible. And the fourth Noble Truth is the truth of the path, the Eightfold Path, leading to the cessation of that original ignorance. And so when we understand that, the framework of the 4 Noble Truths, as the entire context of what the Buddha taught, it continually reinforces the focus for our practice. In other words, if we start hearing or thinking about something that is outside of developing that understanding, we simply know it's not part of Dhamma practice, and we let it go if we want to be Dhamma practitioners. The next 3 weeks, we looked at the Eightfold Path broken down into the wisdom aspects, the virtuous aspects, and the concentration aspects. And that leads us to where we are in this week's course of study, the 7th week, where we're looking at how to apply all of that. And where does it apply? And it applies to the individual self. This is something that was unique during the Buddha's time as far as his teaching, and is still unique today in reference to most of modern Buddhism. The Buddha didn't teach that there's no such thing as a self. He never taught that we should aspire towards nothingness or emptiness. When you think about that, that's simply aspiring for annihilation. And that is rooted in self-loathing. And I won't get into the deep psychological explanation of why that is, but it is. And so the Buddha recognized that as well. And he rejected that, because in very simple and understandable terms, and when you start realizing how the Buddha taught, he looked out on the world and he said, the world is a flame with what? A flame with the fires of passion rooted in ignorance of 4 Noble Truth. And that allowed him, as we learned in the Nagara Sutta, to gently start looking within himself. And when he started looking within himself, he realized that the most ridiculous notion would be that there's no self, because he's looking at it. The incredible practicality of this awakened human being was just that. He saw life as it really is, how we'd all like to. But he had to go through that process as described in the Nagara Sutta and the Aryapariyasana Sutta of recognizing his fabricated views so that he could abandon them and live in right view. And that's what we're talking about right here. And this week's course of study is focused directly on that, on where ignorance arises, because that's where we can end ignorance. And it's through this concentration practice. So now we're looking directly at this not self-characteristic and the environment that it lives in, called impermanence. The Pali word for these are anicca, anatta, and dukkha. Anicca means the impermanence of all phenomena. Anatta, as the Buddha uses the word, does not mean no self or annihilation. It simply means that the views we're holding of a self do not constitute a self. They're not a self. That's the Buddha's use of the word anatta. And as a result of that misunderstanding between a self and its environment, we create stress and suffering in our lives, the third mark of existence. And these are always taught in a very misunderstood and misapplied way to make it impossible to understand this particular insight. This is the entire focus of Vipassana, meaning Vipassana, as the Buddha uses the word, introspective insight into these three marks. This is the heart of the Buddha's Dhamma. So let me continue. Jen, did you have a question?
No.
And this is about those of you that have done their, I should tell you for Peter and Ronwin. This is based on a book that I have out here. I think there's enough copies in here if you're interested, but it's also online on my website that you can read it that way. On the home page under, I think 2020 Sangha Dhamma Study or something like that. And it's all the talks from the past 7 weeks are on there too. So I'm starting about maybe a third of the way in. I won't read the whole chapter, but it is within the environment of impermanence that stress arises and all wrong views of self are established and maintained. Excuse me. That's an obvious statement, isn't it? But it's important in understanding the Dhamma and how the Dhamma, the Buddha's Dhamma, is immediately focused on taking our view from an outside mystical and magical view of where I can go if I do certain things or engage in certain rituals or do this or do that, as kind of as a reward for the difficulties I'm putting myself through. Another word for difficulties would be the stress that I'm adding to myself, as opposed to developing in a very gentle and straightforward and methodical way an understanding of myself in relation to the world around me. So let me read that again and hold that in mind. It is within the environment of impermanence that stress arises and all wrong views of self are established and maintained. What does that mean? It means that the Buddha's Dhamma is meant to be practiced and applied right here, right now in life as life unfolds. There is no Dhamma practice in the past, and there can be no Dhamma practice in the future, can there? If we understand the Buddha's Dhamma. The Dhamma and understanding and self can only be right here and right now. And so we need a mechanism, a vehicle, to reunite the mind and its body so that it can observe what's occurring and reject what is not skillful, what is not in alignment with the Eightfold Path. It requires a well-concentrated mind, doesn't it? A mind that is still distracted by craving after things, wishing things in the past were different, or craving after things in the future has just lost its mind, hasn't it? It's not in its body anymore. The Buddha taught a Dhamma to reunite a mind and its body immediately. Immediately, as soon as we start authentic Dhamma practice, we are uniting our minds and our bodies through the four foundations of mindfulness that we looked at in the second week. And again, you look at the progression. So now we've taken that method of uniting a mind and its body and a realistic view of how to look at the self in relation to the world. And now we're seeing how to actually apply that. It is also within the environment of impermanence that awakening occurs. It's basically saying what I just said in a different way. Awakening or developing the Dhamma only occurs right here and right now, in life as life occurs. What is awakening? The Buddha describes awakening simply and directly, without any ambiguity, esoterica, or any magical thinking. The Buddha's words. Awakening is understanding stress, abandoning the cause of stress, meaning clinging to fabricated views, experiencing the cessation of stress, and developing the path leading to the cessation of stress. Stress in this, the way I'm using it, means any type of confused, diluted, stressful thinking. And it covers every type of human experience, from a mild agitation, which can also be interpreted as bliss often, from a mind rooted in ignorance, or a minor disturbance in this moment, all the way to extreme pain and suffering, all the way to aging and death. It's all part of, as the Buddha described, dukkha. We'll get into that a little bit later, maybe. My words. Understanding impermanence brings an end to clinging to all wrong views. The reason why you want to say something? Because I know you got a great insight into this. No, I know you do. Okay. Well, she does. As we develop the Dhamma, it then becomes something not so much that we are consciously and forcefully doing. In other words, we talked a little bit about this. What happens when I-making starts becoming a part of our Dhamma practice? And this is when we're getting to the very subtle aspects of the Dhamma, we can start looking at it that way. Isn't this I-making? And the reason I-making is further considered doing something solely to continue my ignorant views, which is certainly possible in a spiritual practice that's not focused. The Buddha recognized that too. And again, that's where that structure of the Eightfold Path comes in. It allows us, or provides us, the framework and ongoing guidance to not fall into I-making even within Dhamma practice, to keep it pure, to keep it focused on that one thing of understanding the true nature of a human self in relation to its environment. And how did I get so entangled in this environment? What happened? What was the cause of me losing my mind in relation to myself and the world around me? Where did it come from? And that's another trap. Because when we get into that, where did this come from? How did this happen to me? What is that? It's all I-making. Just as the Buddha awakened and saw a human being and thought there's no need to go any further because here's a human being, I'm it. He also realized that to go any further than the actual disturbance of what's occurring, meaning through analysis or blame making, is also another distraction, to simply observe what's occurring. And so in this moment, if I recognize, because now my Dhamma practice has become focused, as it should be, on me in relation to the world I'm living in, because the focus is there, I can now apply the Dhamma where my focus is. Makes sense, doesn't it? And so in this moment, I can take these principles that I'm learning and realize that if my mind is agitated in any way, that I literally have lost my mind, and I have the wherewithal in this moment to bring it back. It's all up to me. And Peter and Ron, when these might sound like extreme terms, losing your mind, but in relation to the Dhamma, that's exactly what we're doing. We have lost our mind in relation to what is occurring right here and right now. So we take a breath. We bring our minds back in our bodies, and now we've developed an eightfold path to the point where we can recognize, wait a minute, that's I-making. And we remind ourselves, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not what I am. I am no longer going to contribute to my own ignorance. And in this moment, I'm going to stay present with what's occurring. And in the next moment, for most of us, our minds are going to be distracted towards another fabricated thought. What do? We don't beat ourselves up for having to take another breath. We don't beat ourselves up for finding ourselves disjoined from our bodies. We only recognize that in relation to the Eightfold Path as being fortunate Dhamma practitioners, that we have the wherewithal within our Dhamma practice to actually reunite our mind and our body in a very practical and gentle way. There's no magic or mystery about it, is it? We've all experienced the Dhamma at the point of impact. Does anybody know? Let me ask you this. Does everybody, you're all gonna have to answer at once. Does everybody know why that's a true statement?
Wait, say it again.
Well, let me do it this way. Everybody take a breath and be mindful of the in-breath and the out-breath. Everybody did that? Where were you while you were doing it?
In my breath.
Presently here.
Yeah. Now think about something that's distracting. Think about, you know that you got tomorrow's winning lottery ticket. and what you're going to do with all that big pile of money.
Tear up the ticket and go.
And who, well, if you're going to do that, give it to me, 'cause I'll make use of it.
And you'll get distracted.
That the complications of thinking about the lottery ticket that I'm getting tomorrow, or the Maserati that I'm getting tomorrow, or the argument I might have with my coworker tomorrow, all of those have taken me out of my life right here, right now. I've lost my mind. When I take a breath, that simple act reunites the mind and its body, even if it's just for the moment of awareness, the moment of mindfulness. But that's the point. That's why we do jhana meditation and nothing else, because it reunites the mind and its body. And every time we find ourselves going back into yesterday or tomorrow, or the past moment or the next moment, I've lost my mind, haven't I? I might think that I'm still in my body, but my mind is not where my body is, right here, right now. I'm into picking up the lottery ticket or the new car or the argument, rather than taking a breath right here and right now. I'm not overemphasizing this. It's the reason why the whole Dhamma works is because of the meditation method the Buddha taught and the overarching framework. Because now when I take this breath, I'm not just taking a breath, aren't I? I'm seeing this moment unfold from the framework of the Eightfold Path, which means I'm seeing this moment unfold from the framework of being a human being. Because that's what the Buddha taught. He taught that any human being that engaged in right effort and developed the entire Eightfold Path as intended became an alive human being. That's why the Buddha talked about ignorance is like a living death. It's where the teachings that got into eternity got off track, because the Buddha never taught an eternal physical life. What he taught was the end of the death-like state of ignorance, and achieving, the words that he used, was the deathless state of awakening. But it doesn't mean, the Buddha never talked about eternity or living forever or having endless future lives. He taught about awakening in this human life, period. It's the only thing that we're concerned about. Why? Because it's the only thing we know that we're having. It's the same thing as looking out on yourself and realizing, yes, there's a self there. When you sit down and think about what you're doing here, you're having a human life, and you're not having a non-human life, are you? Except we're so enamored with keeping the self going forever and ever and ever that we create these very powerful, very subtle strategies that allow us to establish a human being in non-human form in many, infinite ways. And because it's so palatable to a grasping after mind, how am I going to continue to establish myself? It's not enough that I've screwed myself up in this lifetime through my wrong beliefs. Let me do it in a future life, instead of realizing, wait a minute, I'm having a human life. And a human life is as the Buddha described it so many times. Birth is stressful. Sickness is stressful. Aging is stressful. Death is stressful. Yes? Not getting what is desired is stressful. Getting what is undesired is stressful. Receiving what I don't want is stressful. These are the Buddha's simple and practical teachings on being a human being. He's saying, accept it. Stop running away from it. Stop creating fabricated views over this common human problem of stress and suffering, and enjoy your life, no matter what. And how do we enjoy our life? By being present and understanding what's occurring. No matter what fabricated views we can establish ourselves within, they'll never insulate us from reality. They can't. And that's where stress arises. Excuse me. It is only because I insist that the me that I've created from a fabricated view, a lack of understanding of what's really occurring, and so how could I create a realistic view? This fabricated view of self is now charged with maintaining that fabrication moment by moment. But the fabrication is only applicable in the past or in the future. Because in this present moment, there can be no fabrication. I just want to make just a little bit of a caution here about the compulsive need then to maybe jump to, well, I got to be in the present moment, moment by moment, all the time. Because there's no way to do that. A human mind doesn't work quick enough to constantly establish itself in the present moment. It can only think it's doing it by constantly grasping after the present moment. Following me? So the Buddha's Dhamma is why I always say, one of the reasons why I always say you must be very gentle with yourself. Because by taking a breath, it's the essence of gentleness, isn't it? And in this moment, if my next thought isn't a grasping after thought, it's just another breath, another moment of a mind united in its body, the experience, no matter what it is peaceful, isn't it? Why? Because I completely understand what's occurring and I'm not taking it personal. It's by personalizing a completely impersonal experience, human life, that we distract ourselves from what's occurring and we lose our minds, literally lose our minds. By understanding what's occurring through the Dhamma practice, we gain the ability to simply stay present for our life as our life unfolds. And that's the reward of the Dhamma practice, if you want to put it that way. It's learning how to take life as life comes in a meaningful way. And as we develop this, each and every moment becomes meaningful. Each and every moment of our lives becomes meaningful. Why? Somebody give me an answer.
Because we're here for it.
Because we're here for it. It's simple, isn't it? But it makes complete sense. How could anything be meaningful if we're not present for it? All of you have had experiences of, because you've done it to yourself, of distracting yourself from this moment because this moment wasn't what you want. Whether it was you need more of what's occurring, or you need less of what's occurring, or you need something new, you're bored, you're ambiguous about what's occurring. Instead of simply being present with life as life unfolds. We learned in the Dhatu-Vibhanga Sutta, I think that's the one I mentioned as a secondary reading this week, that the Buddha teaches, and it's pure common sense, that each and every human being is exactly the same in their composition. We're all made of the four elements of earth, wind, fire, and water. The sixth property of the space property, the elements need something to manifest through, and the sixth property of consciousness. Every human being is described that way, and every human being cannot be more than that. We can add things to our sixth property person, and we do that all the time. We create fabricated views that we attach to this sixth property person that we insist is real. And yet we can't change that sixth property person in any way, can we? The only thing that can occur is that sixth property person can have a human life. And it can have a human life based on understanding of what's occurring, or it can have a human life rooted in ignorance. That's really the only choice we have as Dhamma practitioners. And the great reward is by taking up the simple and direct practice, we get to have a human life. It's a pretty good deal. As a way of understanding the environment of impermanence and clinging, the Buddha taught four noble truths, and that's the only reason he taught four noble truths. The development and understanding of the Four Noble Truths occurs within the environment of impermanence. Of course, it has to, doesn't it? Through understanding the environment in which the ego self is established and maintained, all views of self can be recognized. So again, here's the brilliance of the Buddha. The Buddha was in the same environment during his lifetime as we are now. In other words, the people interested in spiritual philosophy or religious philosophy would study those religions and spirituality, and all of them were geared towards this notion that if you followed the religion and did what the religion tells you to do, you'll get some reward. Almost exclusively in a future incarnation, whether it's physical or non-physical, usually non-physical. The largest form of modern Buddhism is Pure Land Buddhism. And again, I don't mean to dismiss it, or even in the explanation I'm going to give it is very, very limited, but basically the practice is to say this one chant over and over and over again, constantly. And if you have that chant on your lips when you die, you'll be taken to it's usually called Tulsita, Buddhist heaven, and there you'll be taken care of by Amitabha Buddha forever. And it sounds great, doesn't it? The only thing I got to do to resolve the fact that my life stinks and I don't know what's going on is to say this chant. And when I'm dead, then I'm good to go. And it may be true, folks. And if I engage in it, I've just lost my life, haven't I? I've traded my life for a chant. And again, I'm not putting down the practice or the people that practice it. I'm making the point. This is why the Buddha said his Dhamma is this and it's not that. Because he wanted people to have a human life while they're having a human life. When I say that this man was the most compassionate human being that ever lived, and even when I say it, it almost brings me to tears because it's so powerful and poignant. That's what he cared about. He cared about all, and I think most of you or all of you would say that care and concern can still be felt 2,600 years later, can't it? By his direct Dhamma, by teaching us it is this and it's not that. He did it because he cared about us. We're doing it because we care about us. Through recognition and right intention, all views of self can be abandoned. Through recognition and right intention, all views of self can be abandoned. Recognition of what? All views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The Eightfold Path develops understanding known as right view. Right view is understanding the truth of stress and the impermanent environment that the ego self is established and maintained. It just makes sense. It directly applied to the problem of ignorance of self. There's nothing in the Buddha's Dhamma that addresses the, There's nothing in the Buddha's Dhamma that addresses the mundane, though significant, common human problems, such as poverty, racism, violence, in all the we all know what's wrong in the world. I don't got to give you a whole list. And there's many people today that say that's what's lacking in Buddhism, except they don't know what the Buddha taught. And that's why we get into, I said before that Pure Land Buddhism is the most common form of modern Buddhism. Maybe, but I think the so-called engaged Buddhism is the most prevalent form of modern Buddhism. And engaged Buddhism directly contradicts what the Buddha taught, because it's a position that something in the world should be different. Things in the world can't be different. How do we know that? How do we know that things in the world right now can't be any different than they are?
Because they are.
Because they are. Doesn't mean that in the future they can't be different. But the reason, and then the next question is, why are the things in the world, why are the difficulties in the world? Why are they here? Why is there racism and go down again, the whole list? Ignorance. So the resolution isn't to rail against racism. We should recognize that how hurtful racism is to me, and then I can recognize how hurtful it is to everybody else. But the resolution isn't in recognition of the difficulties of racism, because all that gets me to do is to say, you're a racist. You must be like me. I'm not a racist. And that's just what we're doing. We're trying to solve the problems of humanity that are rooted in ignorance by taking opinions against ignorance rather than resolving ignorance. And it's not going to happen. The Buddha never saw himself as a savior. He never taught what he thought was going to be a salvific religion, because he knew that dukkha occurs as a consequence of having a human life. Dukkha occurs. Excuse me. And teaching anything that presents a utopic view of the world is simply cruel, isn't it? Especially if you don't teach a way to get there. If you come out by saying, every one of you, unless you want to spend eternity in hell, has to follow these 10 commandments. How cruel can it be? Unless you teach somebody how to follow those 10 commandments. Because most human beings can't, because they're rooted in ignorance, which gives rise to a way of living in the world that is characterized as greed, aversion, and deluded thinking. And so at times, even the most altruistic people will act in greedy ways, won't we? Even very altruistic and compassionate human beings will develop aversion towards certain people in certain situations, such as racism or poverty. And again, I don't want to get into a long philosophical discussion about why that doesn't work. All we have to do is look out in the world. It doesn't work, does it? As a human population, we've been against all the things that we are against, and they're still here. If human beings had the ability to instantly recognize ignorance and put it behind them, the first time a human being murdered another human being, we would have all awakened, because we would have seen how ridiculous that is. And yet we still do it, don't we? Today, there's hundreds of people, hundreds of human beings killing other human beings, and they think they're right in doing it. They think they need to do it to survive this moment. How can people think that way? Again, here's the question. How can people think that way? Ignorance. So it's not because of anger in the world. It's not because of too many guns in the world. That's another discussion. It's because of ignorance. And now, if I don't want remnants of that human condition of ignorance within myself, excuse me. And I'm going to put it this way in a very dramatic way to make the point. If I don't want to be stained by that human ugliness, what can I do about it? I can take to the Dhamma and awaken and rid myself of it. And in that way, you hear me say over and over again, the most loving thing I can do for myself and for all other human beings is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. Why? Because at least I know that I'm not contributing to all the stress and suffering in the world. I know that at that point, I've resolved the racism and the hatred and all the other things that are common to human beings. And just to make the point, I was never racist. I never once used the word that we should never use because it's so ugly. But I grew up in this world, didn't I? And even though the idea of hating other people because they were different, I could never understand it. I couldn't help but be influenced by that. And so the subtle influence was that, yeah, I don't hate people, but maybe they are a little different than me. That's not all that terribly hurtful, is it? Except to me. Because now I've separated myself from humanity and I've created stress in my life. Even if it's not in a hurtful way, even if I don't go out and express racism in a direct way, even if if I don't realize it in myself, yet it's there. It's hurting me, isn't it? And it's also hurting the rest of the world. And it's at these very subtle levels that Dhamma practitioners can resolve, that Dhamma practitioners can, let me put it this way, that Dhamma practitioners get to resolve this issue. It's not based on everybody else in the world waking up. It's not about me becoming part of the woke movement. I didn't even hear that word until a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still not quite sure what it means. It sounds like it's what I'm looking for, but what I've seen, it's not really it. If that's what I really want, it's right here in front of me. It begins with accepting myself. The Buddha was the most radical acceptor of all times because he understood the difference between acceptance and approval. I don't have to approve of myself right now. And maybe those little bits of remnants or greed that I have, remnants of greed or aversion that I might have within me. Because that's where I start practicing the Dhamma. In this sixth property person that does not understand who he is in relation to the world is where we practice the Dhamma, right here, right now. The only place that it can be. It starts with my own wrong beliefs of myself in relation to the world and develops a profound right view as described by the Buddha. I think that's enough for today, huh? There's quite a bit left. I get a little excited when I'm talking about it? It's exciting to learn this stuff, isn't it? Thank you. There's more to that. And like I said, I gave the first talk on this past Tuesday, if you want to catch up on it. So I think I presented in a useful way the point that the Dhamma resolves right here and right now where we are. It resolves within this thing called anatta, this ego personality, this thing that the Buddha described as the 5 clinging aggregates, which we're going to get to in 2 weeks. So thank you again. Let's start with Mary. Mary, how are you today? Hello, Mary.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Congratulations, Jen.
Oh, hi, Mary.
May I say that Ram is here as well?
Oh, yes. I already said congratulations.
Oh, okay. They just got their teaching certificates. So how are you today, Mary?
I'm very good, John. How are you?
I'm good. Did you like this morning's talk?
Yes, very much. Often when you're hearing it, you may be going through a certain issue, and it's grounding to remind yourself about non-self, that things aren't personal, that you know, it's at the point of contact that you need to pay attention to what's happening, you know, what's rising and passing away in your body. So it's very timely, and it'll be helpful to me for something I'm thinking about this weekend. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Mary. Please tell David I said hello.
I will.
Good morning, Trevor. How are you?
Hi there. Thank you, John, for the teaching this morning. Yeah, just one comment I really loved from the reading this week, your line. I thought it went well with what you're saying today. The Buddha taught a common solution to the common human problem of dukkha. And I guess we have this human tendency to try to strive toward something special or magical and more than what we are. And I just love how you've taught us that the Buddha's Dhamma was about a common solution that's very direct and very straightforward and available to all. So just very grateful that we have this gift of your passing on the Buddha's Dhamma to us when it's unfortunately become, it seems, somewhat unique these days.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. And even during the Buddha's time, it was unique. You know, the Anapanasati Sutta is just about that, the uniqueness of the Buddha's Dhamma, even during his lifetime. Thank you. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Hi. So the 3 marks of existence, when you engage in the Dhamma, you begin to see something that has always been happening. You just didn't recognize it, which is having a direct experience of the impermanence of anatta. So even if you are new to the Dhamma, if you have ever noticed that you feel strongly about a situation today, and you decide to put it away for today, and then you wake up the next day and you see that you feel very differently about it, then you had an experience of the impermanence of anatta. Anatta is how we view ourselves right now in this moment, and if you see that you're viewing yourself differently, or you're viewing a situation differently today versus yesterday, then you are starting to see that how I feel about a situation or how I feel about myself is not always the same. And the more often that happens and you recognize it, the more often when you're in the moment of feeling very strongly about a situation, you are able to approach those feelings with skepticism.
That's good.
And when you approach them with skepticism, you're able to let them go more easily in this moment and say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to wait a week, a day, an hour, a minute, 30 seconds, and see if maybe I can just watch myself feel strongly about this and then watch myself let it go. And that happens more quickly when you're engaged in Dhamma and you can see and you have a framework for understanding what all of that is.
That's outstanding. And I first heard Jen use the word skeptical in relation to looking at your own ignorant views. And it's just the perfect word for it, isn't it? We should look at what we've been doing all along with skepticism, rather than letting just the fact that we've been doing it for 30, 40, or 64 years, in my case, that gives it validity. You know, again, the Dhamma gives us the framework for looking at these absurd things that we hold on to and the pain they cause us, but it gives us the right view to see it, let it go. Beautifully described. You should think about becoming a teacher. More. You too, Lorna.
I can't remember exactly, but a week or two ago, I said that I'd sort of got the understanding that when we catch ourselves in a fabrication, thinking about a fabrication, that you could almost, on every occasion, you must think of yourself as, and be gentle with yourself. That because you're just catching yourself in the fabrication, and you just must release it. Now that release depends on if you, it depends if you understand why you're releasing. And when you, and that time that we went through that, I kind of got to be hard with yourself and is to be negative to yourself.
Yep.
Is to just switch your fabrication.
Yep.
You're not going anywhere.
Yep. The essence of eye making.
So you catch yourself eye making about a topic or a subject or a conversation or whatever we're imagining. And then you realize you're doing it. So you must just be gentle with yourself and release the fabrication and do nothing else. No judgment, anything. Because if you judge yourself, you're just continuing on a fabrication, a negative one. So I kind of got that a few weeks ago. And then since then, I've noticed in my practice that I'm finding it much easier when I catch myself in a fabrication. I just release it. And and because I understand why I must just release it, not judge myself or judge anything else.
Yeah.
I've thought this fabrication time and time again. I must be, that's all a judgment. Just so once you understand why you have to just release it, it becomes easier and easier and easier just to release it.
Thank you. And you're pointing out that as we develop the Eightfold Path becomes easier, because that's the point. We have to, again, when I think about how Siddhartha Gautama developed this, just the brilliance of him putting this Eightfold Path package together, because 9 or 10 probably wouldn't work, and 6 or 7 we know wouldn't work. But these 8 factors of the Eightfold Path give us the ability to do just that. And that what you're describing is practicing the Dhamma at the point of contact. That's where it happens. And it does become easier and easier, doesn't it?
It does. But it was seeing that point of understanding that if you don't just release it, you're actually just carrying on a fabrication. You're just changing a fabrication.
Yep. And
that was the point that made it easier for me to understand the release and that's the only thing you can do with your mind is when you're catch yourself in the fabrication is just to let it go.
Yeah, and anything else you're just engaged in like analysis. Where did this come from, or how am I having this feeling, or why did my mommy not give you that cookie when I was 3 years? All of that, and it's just a distraction, and it's always for either finding blame to put on someone else, finding blame to put on the world at large, and mostly it's to blame myself. How could I be, whatever game we play, whatever story we tell ourselves for the fact that we have to develop wisdom is just silly, isn't it? Blaming yourself for not knowing something, especially once it's in front of you, what's the solution? Learn it. There's no reason to judge yourself. And again, as soon as you're doing that, as soon as you think that this thought should be different than it is, you've lost. But it doesn't mean that all is lost. You just take a breath, come back into the moment and practice the Dhamma right here. And you've done that, uncountable times over the last 4 years. And it's taken you to a very fine point of understanding the Dhamma and where it applies. You're seeing that defining line between reality and fabrication. Yep. That's great.
Thank you.
Peter, welcome to our sangha. As everybody knows here, we are usually a talkative bunch, but nobody has to talk. You can sit quietly, or you can tell us what you think, whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, thank you, John, for this. I like what I keep hearing about being gentle yourself. And I heard a teaching the other day that if you don't have patience, you have aggression.
Huh.
And I think, and I really like that. It reminds me, this reminds me of what you're saying, reminds me of that, in that it gets to the subtleties of our aggression toward ourselves.
Yeah.
And our, inability to be patient with ourselves and our letting go of our fabrications. And a way that I like to think about, the same thing that you're talking about, I have been thinking about it in terms of foreground and background, that awakening or awakened mind is always the background of the foreground of our fabrications and our clinging, and the process of letting go of those things is just simply a refocusing on the background, the enlightened or awakened background to everything that we create and everything that comes and goes and arises and passes away. The background is still there.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Peter. That's such an interesting choice of words, because in the four foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha teaches to bring mindfulness to the fore. And so you're right. We're actually taking a right application of mindfulness and bringing it forward, applying it in here. And patience comes from taking true refuge, meaning true refuge is taking refuge in the understanding that a human being actually developed this. That's true refuge in the Buddha. And taking refuge in the fact that he left his Dhamma and it's still here for us. That's taking true refuge in that. And being part of a well-focused sangha, the third refuge. The Buddha taught his cousin Ananda that the most important aspect of Dhamma practice is to be part of a well-focused sangha. Again, taking refuge. And from really taking refuge, I can be patient with myself and others, because now I know I'm doing something that is going to give me what I hope to get out of life. Just that. So thank you so much, and welcome to our sangha. Hello, Ram.
Hello, John. Good day today.
Yeah.
I was reading last night, and I woke up a couple of times in the middle of the night, and because something had struck me during my reading, and it's about how you've written the book. And I've had my issues in the past about the book, and I've talked to you about it. And I'm starting to see how good it is.
Finally.
Finally.
Could you pay me for it now?
Double. Because there's this circular pattern in it that's
Vibhanga Sutta.
Yeah, that's really good. It's just every time it goes back to the beginning, and then it adds a little more. And I saw it as like a wheel going down the road, and it was just wonderful to actually see the structure of the book and how again it relates to the Buddha's way of teaching. Same way. So I also realized that I use a highlighter when I'm reading, so I get then the essential parts get I just wore out my highlighter, and I'm not even halfway through the book. So everything that's in there is really hangs together very well, and it's all essential, and this is like the third or fourth time that I've read the book.
Yeah. But
it's really the first time that I've really put effort into reading the book. And it's a joy to do. So I realized that I once suggested that we should do some editing on the book, and I apologize for that.
Well, I accept that.
My dad used to tell me about a game he used to play when he was a little boy growing up in Holland. And they would stop the wings on the windmill. You can hang on a rope and it breaks the whole thing, and the wings stop. And then one of the kids would then kick off his wooden shoes and hop on the bottom of the wing, hang on to it. And then they'd let go of the brake. And then go for a ride, up and over, and it's like 30, 40 feet, and it'll be screaming all the way. So I realized that the wheel of the Dharma can take you on such rides.
Yeah.
And then when you're done screaming, you should take a look and enjoy your new perspective.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say, and add to that, and stop clinging to windmills.
Yeah, when you're at your house, you give it a gun.
Thank
There used to
you,
be
Ron.
one in Holland.
That's right.
Great.
It's not there anymore?
Fantastic.
It's still there. It was a Danish guy who built it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I used to live near there. I remember going up there one time. Thank you. Yeah, when I put the book together, it was the Dhamma that I went through it. I wrote out the chapters, and then I put them in that sequence, and it really was referring back to how the Buddha taught. That was that particular sequence there. It does work, but it works because it's the Dhamma. I don't know if it's any brilliant writing that it works. Ronwood, good morning, and welcome to our sangha.
Thank you.
How was your meditation this morning?
It was great, and I wanted to thank you for welcoming me and for creating a space for this. And I think for me, meditation still feels very new, and is something that I'm trying to incorporate more into my life. And this week was like a lot of changes were happening very quickly, and I think the focus of coming back to my breath and not allowing myself to spin out into the stress and the imaginings of what could happen with stressful situations helped me a lot, and having a regular meditation practice helps me come back to that. So I appreciate this place and the words that you were saying and everybody here.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome to our sangha. Have either of you, both of you, been to my website, becoming-buddha.com?
I have, yeah.
I don't think that
So on there's guided meditations from 5 to 45 minutes. And so you can listen to those, the same words that we used here that, again, relate to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And if you're just starting out, doesn't sound like you are, but you could start with shorter periods of meditation and gradually add time to that. But the important thing is not so much length of time, but consistency. If you can do that twice a day, you'll have a well-established meditation practice. And I hope you continue to join us and you'll learn about the Eightfold Path and what the Buddha actually taught. It's remarkable stuff. So again, welcome. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Ron, thank you for that. And also thank you earlier for explaining responsibilities and things to me earlier. I may have, the things that I've written kind of were, I think, ahead of where we were today. So, but I did make some notes prior to that, and it's no secret for the sangha that this is probably for me, the more profound part of the Dhamma for understanding for me.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the 3 marks of existence are linked and intertwined with each other through the process of dependent origination and the 12 positive links. 3 marks of existence directly tie into the 4 noble truths. Impermanence is a truth related to dukkha. All that is, right? And anatta is a truth of human existence relating to clinging and craving. And dukkha relates to the truth of life, suffering, dissatisfaction, so on. So with that cumulation in order of understanding, the clinging and craving to impermanent phenomena bring about all suffering. Dhamma's purpose is to develop refined mindfulness to abandon clinging and craving of all impermanent phenomena. Refined mindfulness leads into disenchantment to impermanent phenomena, which develops dispassion to the reactions brought on by thoughts and feelings. which are more of an aggregate. And the dispassion allows the detachment of the ego, self, the anatta, it allows the detachment of ego with dispassion, allows the mind and body to join and remain in equanimity. So that process is to maintain that on a day-to-day basis, moment-to-moment basis, is where the practice, and again, it's introspective, everyone's different, is the wheels spinning out, is the real work for me is to, Jen used the word skepticism, and thank you, but maybe this is some conditioned thinking of skepticism as a philosophy, but isn't dispassion a more appropriate word instead of skepticism? And I'm not trying to,
No,
it's
I
not
think
about,
it is. I think it is. Skepticism might not work for everybody, for sure.
right, it's introspective, and that's why I clarified for that. But if the way Jen's using skepticism and the way I'm describing my understanding, would dispassion be that skepticism that Jen was referring to?
Yeah, I would say, and maybe we're playing semantic games, but I think dispassion is more a quality of mind, where skepticism is a immediate response to what's occurring in my mind.
But through dispassion and the
liberation
of ego.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm getting from this very auspicious and profound chapter. Is from what these words that's just thrown out there, and hopefully it's not garbled and it's fluent, but that's how I'm approaching my moment to moment day.
Yeah, you're applying the Dhamma as it's intended, and you're seeing those things that you're kind of what Lorna was talking about too. You're seeing what you're supposed to see, and you're letting go of what you're supposed to let go of. It's an actual path. I mean, there's things that we do. It couldn't be further from religion and most spiritual beliefs because nothing is taken on belief. Nothing is taken on faith. Everything is to be experienced. That's the problem for most people, isn't it? Most people want to just adopt an idea, and the idea itself should change everything. Of course, an idea can't change the way you think. It's the root of ideology, which is clinging. You described it beautifully. Thank you. Morning, Anthony.
Good morning. Really appreciated this week's talk, because I sometimes think that awakening is just some state that you hit where the air is going to smell cleaner and you're going to feel lighter, and people will like you more, and everything you say will be perfect, and you'll be living in a state of bliss.
That's not it.
Then I hit this part here where you quote the Buddha as awakening is understanding stress, abandoning the cause of stress, experiencing the sensation of stress, and developing the path leading to the cessation of stress.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
Nothing more.
And
And for many people, that's not enough.
I said, wow, I'm pretty close to being awakened, according to this definition, because I'm not perfect, but I catch myself when I say something that's not skillful a lot more than I used to.
Yeah.
And sometimes almost immediately. So that's this is an attainable definition of awakening.
It is.
And that's what I really appreciated about this week.
Well, thank you.
You can achieve that.
Yes, that's
doable.
Any human being can achieve it. That's the point of what good is a Dhamma for human beings if human beings can't develop it in this lifetime? And the Buddha realized that. He realized that every spiritual system of his time was not that. And so he taught this. And what more could we want? I wouldn't, if there was a way, if prayer could give me the big pile of gold, that would be the most brutal thing that could happen to me, wouldn't it? Because that pile of gold would take the rest of my life away from me because I'd be ensconced in it. But the Buddha teaches me the value of life is not in a pile of gold or the biggest house or the most recognition. You know, it's not being the world's greatest meditation teacher. The value of life is being present for life. What else could be valuable? What else could be valuable? And the Buddha figured that out and taught a way to do it for each and every human being. Again, nothing special. We don't need, nobody has to approve of our practice. You don't need me to say, okay, you're good to go. You can develop awakening. We do it for ourselves. This incredible structure. Thank you, Anthony. Kevin, good to see you. We missed you for a couple of weeks.
I just want to echo what other Sangha members have said in thanking you for bringing us these teachings and for your interpretation of them. It makes it so clear and helps us further our way along the path. And I wrote a tiny reflection of what these, the 3 marks of existence might mean. It's incomplete, but it's a reflection of what others have said as well. Impermanence, anicca, pervades everything. Anatta, the not-self, does everything to deny impermanence and to ignore ignorance. Even during meditation, anatta stands by to distract the seeker from the task and to continue conditioned thinking for its own self-perpetuation. Every session has the potential to continue this cycle. We must learn to calm our breath and calm mental fabrications. Ever deepening meditative absorption can release us from our needing.
Beautiful, Kevin. Thank you. You need to come more often. I know you're busy. Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I haven't been here for the last 2 weeks because I was traveling.
Okay.
And I did keep up with the readings. It was a little
Great.
harder to keep up with the meditation practice. And I realized I really missed it. And I stayed with a relative who was really suffering. I was like, oh, I wish she had a Dhamma practice that would help her. And I thought, all right, I'm going to give a description of the 4 Noble Truths a crack. We had a really good conversation.
Ah, great. Yeah. It's not that complicated, is it?
No.
Yeah. And how is your meditation practice going?
Better now that I'm back in my environment.
Yeah. Many people say that, and that's just to be expected. Glad you joined us this morning. Morning, Becky.
Good morning, John. So nice to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to echo especially what Trevor said, and what I've really, I'm beginning to understand the importance of the concentration and how to increase concentration while you're meditating. Not really how to, but sort of what to do and how to make your mind watch your thoughts rise and pass away, which is, I like the idea of the background that, I can't remember your name.
Peter.
Oh, yeah, I should know that. I was a Peter. And it's just this time going through and listening to you last week, especially. I listened to class last week, and it just is, I'm learning so much, and things are starting to happen that it's very gratifying, and it's wonderful to know that after a while being exposed to this, you really do start to be able to do it like you said, Anthony, and you can actually see the difference in the way you relate to the world. And that concentration thing is just paramount.
Yeah, Becky, you said a lot. Listen to this talk again, but listen to your words. You know, you'll realize how far you've developed this. It's profound. So, thank you. Morning, Michael.
Hi, John. I wrote a couple notes down just during class, and also they're aligned with actually Tim's perspective on this whole thing, because as you know, great minds think in parallel lines.
Awoke mind.
Anyhow, just a couple of things, to add maybe or help understand. Distractions and discord that occur, those are the things that occur in our mind that keeps us from having a tranquil mind, a still mind. Without a still mind, the body does not unite the mind does not unite with the body. So if it doesn't, we're not going to experience that equanimous state, that peace and calm. So how do we go about limiting these distractions that we all have? And there is no doubt about it. The distractions are what keep us from living the Dhamma. Okay, and filling our mind and taking this out of our mind. Okay? So, understanding the perspective of right view, the Eightfold Path, that's a key understanding to all that we do and the other aspects of the Eightfold Path. Okay, and being mindful, okay, mindful of following, of right view in relation to the rest of the Eightfold Path enables us to actually, for dispassion to arise within us. If we are mindfully engaged with the Eightfold Path in each moment, dispassion will arise. Okay? But again, mindfulness requires concentration. Concentration is another factor that we must incorporate into our understanding of or carrying out the Eightfold Path in each moment of our existence. So that concentration develops in jhana meditation is so important, so that we understand it and we can apply it to the mindfulness that's required as we, at different times, we call upon the Eightfold Path to guide us through whatever it is that is distracting our minds. So, again, the whole idea, again, and just like reading a quick description of mindfulness, mindfulness is the dispassionate, focused awareness on whatever is arising in the present moment without being distracted by any judgments or discriminating thoughts. Being mindful of feelings as feelings arise allows the feeling to dissipate and allows a deeper tranquility to develop. And this obviously leads us into this mindfulness and this dispassion. Again, I bang the drum every time almost. It's like what is seen is only seen, what is heard is only heard, what is sensed is only sensed, and what is cognized is only cognized. That the dispassion that enables us to have maintain the mind and its relation to being united with the body. So I think that's basically all I wanted to say.
You said a lot too, so thank you, Michael. Julia, how are you today?
I'm very good, John. Thank you. I found this chapter very, very profound, and especially the last part. I don't think we got up to that part yet. But I have a question, so I'm just going to save the question. I'm going to send it to you so that.
No, it's a question. It's fine. I mean, I'm not unless you unless you don't want to.
No, I don't mind asking the question. But I just feel like I don't want to take up a lot of time. It seems like this question is really this quote that the Buddha said is very, very profound, and I just want to clarification on it, because it's easy for me to like see it as mystical or esoteric knowledge, and so I'm like, no, that's wrong. I have to bring it back.
Yeah.
So I want you to tell me what it means. There's a point where he says all things are conditioned particles of energy that have coalesced into the appearance of form, and to me that
it's the most practical teaching he ever gave. He's simply describing the human, not human, he's simply describing the universe. And there's nothing personal about energy and matter coming together and forming something. That's just life. And again, right when you take the self out of it, that's all that's left, is seeing the world that way. In other words, as a human being, I like oak trees, but I really can't stand poplars. So I'm creating stress in my mind because there's an oak and there's a poplar. Can't somebody cut down that poplar right now? But again, the practical mind of an awakened human being is there's an oak and there's a poplar. And again, I'm using kind of a silly explanation, but it's just that way. And that's what you're developing too, and that's what the Buddha is describing. All of the things, everything in the world that you see arising and passing away is made up of these particles that he's describing. He also talked about, the word he's using is kalapas. Siddhartha Gautama described the super subatomic particles that physicists are just realizing today. But he said that there's millions and millions of these things that he called kalapas that blink into and blink out of existence in the blink of an eye. And the only useful teaching on that is completely non-mystical. It's just to point out impermanence. Every single thing we look at is made up of that type of impermanent energy and matter clinging together, by the way. So thank you for bringing that up. It's an important point. And it points out, it's interesting that you see that there could be some ambiguity in what the Buddha is teaching, when really what it is an entirely practical teaching, isn't it? Thank you.
The way you put it, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it is just, the Buddha saw the world from the point of view of reality, and he taught us to do the same.
It's amazing how he described it like that.
Yeah.
It's pure form.
2,600 years ago.
That's like when I read that, I was like, wow, that's really deep.
And think about this. He did it without any type of scientific measurement at all. He did it by being mindfully present with life as life occurs, and watching a gnat die and disintegrate in front of him. I mean, I'm like, whatever it was that occurred, simply by being present. And again, it goes back to taking refuge. Do we want to have that type of understanding? I do. And I can. I can develop the Dhamma and see things in that way. And the Buddha's Dhamma is meant to change everything, and it does. And it changes nothing. We're still the same human being. The world is still the same, isn't it? The only thing that's different between this moment and the last moment is the way that I think about it, what I'm using to frame what's occurring to me. And I've developed something called an Eightfold Path that frames the way that I see things. We can do that with anything, can't we? We can develop something else that will frame the way that we see things. We could develop a Zen practice, which will certainly change the way that we see things. Or we can decide that I've been a Republican for 50 years. Let me go learn what it's like to be a Democrat. Again, I'm using a silly example, but that will certainly change my view of things, won't it? And it's just that way. It's our choice how we're going to see things, not anybody else's. It's not the Buddha's choice. It's not my choice. It's not God's choice. It's not Lucifer's choice. It's not Trump's choice. It's not Pelosi's choice. It's nobody's choice how we live our lives except ourselves as individuals. And as we develop the Dhamma, we start seeing things as the Buddha sees.
Sure.
That's too much teach. I'm going to take that.
Can I just say one thing? If I may?
Certainly.
To Julia's point today with that. And it reminded me of our discussion after class on Tuesday. Everything in the universe, including the universe, is impermanent.
Yep.
I remember you saying that.
So don't start the small stuff, right? And the universe is one big recycling plant. We're all made up of the same stuff stars are made up of, and
Yep.
rinse, repeat, and it's all impermanent.
Yep.
And when I read that, I was like, what your reaction? But I also realized that's what Buddha was saying. The Buddha was saying that, and which is
Yeah.
quite incredible to come to that conclusion 2,600 years ago.
Yeah, again, with no instruments. But he was also looking out on the world, and he noticed last night there was a light right there, and it's not here today. He understood impermanence that way. And when you look at the world that way, that there's a star with likely planets around it, and one moment it's there and one moment it's not, what does that say about my own impermanence? And why do I think I'm all that when I'm not? Why do I think I'm all that when I know I'm only a 6-property person and I can never be more than that? And what does that leave me when I finally understand that? It leaves me at peace. Because then I don't have to do anything. Then I don't have to do anything to maintain a self-referential ego self.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
So next week, we're getting into dependent origination and the 5 clinging aggregates. And we're actually going to spend 4 weeks on that one chapter. It's going to be the first 2 weeks on dependent origination, the first week on dependent. Did I say 4 weeks? We're going to spend 2 weeks, 4 classes on the next chapter. The first 2 classes will be on dependent origination. The second 2 classes will be on the 5 clinging aggregates. And the second class will be taught by Matt Brana. So our teachers are going to start teaching. We'll finish with, and that's the 21st, and Matt will have a Qigong class afterwards. So again, I mention this occasionally, but Qigong is one of the few body-based practices that I would recommend. It greatly enhances our Dhamma practice. Right, Lauren?
Yeah.
It really does. Okay. We're going to finish with metta as we always do. I can find it. These are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. So again, just find your relaxed meditation posture and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And again, the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied. Unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Peace. See you, Trevor.
Bye-bye. Thank you, John. Take care.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, will do.
Bye-bye.